Ezekiel 33:3.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday Bible Studies. Today we'll be doing Exodus chapters 30 to 33. We'll do a quick overview of Exodus. Then following that, we'll look at a review of Exodus 31 to 33. If there's any questions, we'll do those after the review, and then we'll do the reading for next week. Exodus 1:8 to 11. Then a new king, who did not know Joseph, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become too numerous and too powerful for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase even more. And if a war breaks out, they may join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So the Egyptians appointed taskmasters over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. As a result, they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for the Pharaoh. We know there was another city built as well, which was the Egyptian city of On, also known as Heliopolis. You could find this in the Greek Septuagint, but you will not see this in the Hebrew in the Masoretic text. It was missing. Exodus 2 and 23. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Exodus focuses on the lineage of the Levites. So Jacob had a son called Levi. We have Kohath, Amram, and Jochebed. These are the parents of Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. So Aaron and Moses are brothers. Jochebed is the mother. As we've mentioned before, Jochebed actually has the name the Lord in her name. The interesting thing, though, is we didn't see the Lord's name being revealed until Exodus 3:14, and then later the Lord proclaims it. So if we look back at Genesis 4:26, we can see in the 1611 King James Version, it doesn't say that people proclaim the name of the Lord. In the side notes, it said that people profane the name of the Lord. The Hebrew word is shalal, and shalal could mean to proclaim or it could be to defile. Moses was to be God to Pharaoh and to Aaron, and Aaron his prophet. We saw the first plague, which was blood in the river Nile. The second plague was the infestation of frogs. The third plague was the swarm of gnats or lice. The fourth plague was masses of insects or flies in some translations. The fifth plague, death of all livestock. The sixth plague, disease and boils. The seventh plague, storm and giant hail. The eighth plague, a plague of locusts. And the ninth plague, darkness was over the land. And the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn sons. Since Israel was the firstborn of the Most High God, the Lord, you see here that we have the death of the firstborn sons of the Egyptians being the final plague. And then we have the Exodus out of Egypt. We're going to start our overview of Exodus chapters 31 to 33. Starting with Exodus chapter 31. In Exodus 31, we cover the details of the Sabbath. We look at how the law was written, and the Lord provides his people with wisdom. And I'll show you where that is. Starting first with the Sabbath. Sabbath is in Strong's Concordance 7676. So this is the dictionary. And you can see that Sabbath actually connects to the word Shabbat. And so I'm going to show you the difference between these two words. Most people know what the Sabbath is, but when they see this word Shabbat, they're not really connecting it. Shabbat actually points us back to the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 2. And this is when God rested. God rested on the seventh day. So we can see here that there were 6 days and then God rested. That's Genesis 2:2. And so we can see the word Sabbath has to do with the idea of resting. Because here we have this word Shabbat, which is pointing to Shabbath. And then we can see it means to cease, to desist, or to rest. So there's a direct connection with the word Sabbath and resting. Exodus 31, 12 to 17. And the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites, surely you must keep my Sabbaths, for this will be a sign between me and you for generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Keep the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. Anyone who profanes it must surely be put to death. Whoever does any work on that day must be cut off from among his people. For 6 days work may be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath must be surely put to death. The Israelites must keep the Sabbath, celebrating it as a permanent covenant for generations to come. It is a sign between me and the Israelites forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And of course, when we looked at this word Sabbath that shows up in these verses here, Sabbath directly connects us to Genesis 2:2, which talked about God resting on the seventh day. The Lord instructs that the Sabbath is to remain forever 3 times in Exodus 31. If you look carefully, you'll see it's in Exodus 31 and 13, Exodus 31 and 16, Exodus 31 and 17. So the Sabbath is not to be done away with. It can't be changed. Is breaking the Sabbath a serious offense? Numbers 15, 32 and 40. While the Israelites were in the wilderness, a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath day. So we're actually talking around the same period of time. Remember, they were in the wilderness for 40 years, and this is when Moses is receiving these instructions. Those who found the man gathering wood brought him to Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation. And because it had not been declared what should be done to him, they placed him in custody. And the Lord said to Moses, the man must surely be put to death. The whole congregation is to stone him outside the camp. So the whole congregation took the man outside the camp and stoned him to death, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Later, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and tell them that throughout the generations to come, they are to make for themselves tassels. Just a moment. I'm going to start that again. While the Israelites were in the wilderness, a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found the man gathering wood brought him to Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation. And because it had not been declared what should be done to him, they placed him in custody. So we can tell this part in Numbers is the same period of time as their 40 years in the wilderness. So it's just looking from a different angle. And the Lord said to Moses, the man must surely be put to death. The whole congregation is to stone him outside the camp. So you can see this is directly coming from the Lord. So the whole congregation took the man outside the camp and stoned him to death, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Later the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and tell them that throughout the generations to come, they are to make for themselves tassels for the corners of their garments, with a blue cord on each tassel. These will serve as tassels for you to look at, so that you will remember all the commandments of the Lord, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourselves by following your own heart and your own eyes. And you will remember and obey all my commandments, and you will be holy to your God. So is the Sabbath something very important? It's extremely important. And you can see there was an individual that's made an example of. So here we can see that the tassels that were on their clothing was to help them to remember not one commandment, but all the commandments, and not to prostitute themselves to their own hearts. In other words, don't follow your emotions. Don't try to decide because it doesn't make sense to your heart. You're going to do something different. Did the Lord really mean forever? Exodus 31, 16 to 17. The Israelites must keep the Sabbath, celebrating it as the first word we see here is permanent. Covenant means an agreement. So it is a permanent covenant for the generations to come. It is a sign between me and the Israelites, and then we see the word forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And of course, this rested idea is connected to the word Sabbath. If we look at this word forever, and this word permanent. It's actually the same word. It says here, olam, 5769, long duration, antiquity, futurity. If you take a look at the different verses, like Genesis 3:22, Genesis 6:3, and also Genesis 9:12, you can see here that it's used as forever, always, and perpetual. There's no way you can misunderstand this. So you can't change the Sabbath. You can't say that it had an end date. It was forever. The Sabbath was a perpetual covenant, a covenant of agreement for all generations to come. It is a sign of knowing the Lord. If you know the Lord, you will keep the Sabbath. Exodus 31:14. Keep the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. Anyone who profanes it must surely be put to death. And we saw that in Numbers. Whoever does any work on that day must be cut off from among his people. So you have to be separated then from everyone else. So what does the word holy mean? And holy is the word kodesh. The Hebrew word kodesh, 6944, it means apartness or sacredness. Okay, so apartness means to be separated. And we can see what happens when someone would break the Sabbath. They would be separated or killed. John 15:19. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, because of this, the world hates you. So you can see in the book of John, we're talking about the separateness of the Christian disciples. They are to be separate. Being separate is being holy. If you are like the world, you are not separate from the world. So because you are trying to be separate of the world, John is saying the world is going to hate you because of this. 1 John 2:15. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. If you're caught up in this illusion called life, and you think that the world is all that there is, and you've fallen in love with this world, and you want to stay here and cling on to this world, you don't have the love of the Father in you. James 4:4. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? I'll repeat that. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. So you can't be both. You can't have everyone like you in the world, but then at the same time be friends with God. You will be distant. Be in the world, but not of the world. The Lord doesn't care if you're popular. As a matter of fact, if you are popular, you don't know him. You are living in the world, but that doesn't mean you have to be like it. All these different ideas that get pressed on us over time through media, through movies, through music, through laws that the state passes. If you're popular, that means you typically agree with the pack. You agree with the majority, but you'll find that the disciples, they're the minority that does not agree with the world. They are in the world, but they are not like it. There is no need to keep up with the Joneses when you are keeping company with Jesus. If you're trying to impress your neighbors, what are you ultimately trying to do? You're trying to be of the world. And if you're of the world, you are at enmity with God. Don't worry about keeping up with your neighbors. Worry about what God thinks of you. What does the word sanctify mean? Kadash. So we looked at Kodesh. Kodesh is holy. And what does holy have to do with? Separateness. In other words, separating yourself from the world. Now we have a very similar sounding word, which is Kadesh. What is the idea of sanctification? Let's find out. Kadesh, to be set apart or consecrated. And you can see that it actually originates from the word Kodesh. So when we talk about being holy, when you're holy, you are separate from the others. And when Kadesh, when we talk about being sanctified, sanctified is being set apart or consecrated. So we'll look at that word consecrated as well. We're going to be very clear in our language. Kadesh, to be apart or consecrated. Let's look at John 15:19 again. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, because of this, the world hates you. Consecrated means to be dedicated to God. You're either dedicated to Caesar, you're dedicated to the state, or you're dedicated to God. If Caesar does something that's contrary to God's command, what do you have to do? You have to disobey. However, if the Caesar is placing laws that are lawful in God's eyes, you keep them, because Romans 13 tells you God placed those people in authority. The 2 tablets of stone given to Moses with the law were written with the finger of the Lord. I'll repeat that. The tablets given to Moses with the law were written with the finger of the Lord. Exodus 31 and 18. When the Lord had finished speaking with Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone inscribed with the finger of God. Does it actually say the finger of God? 676, the word is etzba. Etzba means a finger. So yes, God literally chiseled out those 2 tablets of stone with his finger. This is important because this also connects to the idea of the Sabbath. We're going to see the first place in the Bible the word finger was actually used. Exodus 8 and 19. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. When we studied Exodus, what did we find out? We found out there was a series of plagues. Well, there was a plague where the magicians were unable to replicate, and that was the lice. So the gnats or the lice, this was something the magicians were not able to replicate, and every plague that came from there, the magicians had tapped out. Once they saw this 3rd plague, they said, "This came from the finger of God." Colossians 2 and 14. This is an argument that I hear quite often when people say the law has been done away with, and they explain Sunday or the Lord's Day as an excuse with Colossians 2 and 14. But you're going to see it doesn't work. Having blotted out the handwriting in the decree against us, which was adverse to us, he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. This line is used to basically take the 10 commandments and do them away with. While you are not under the law, you're under grace. The 10 commandments were not nailed to the cross. And if you love Christ, you are to keep his commandments. In this verse, it specifically says, the handwritten decrees against us were nailed to the cross. Was the law handwritten or was it finger written? Finger written. It's a detail you're missing. The law was written with the finger of God, not handwritten. If you look at these words, you'll actually see words like dogma sin and kyriagraphon, meaning this was something that was written like a decree, something like a man would write on a pen and paper. This is not the finger of God. So you're mistaking Colossians and you're saying that the law has been done away with. While we're not under the law, we're under grace. The law was not done away with. You're expected to keep it. If you love Christ, you will keep his commandments. And you cannot nail stone to wood. It doesn't work very well. The Lord appointed craftsmen and gave them their skills through his Spirit. Exodus 31, 1-10. Then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with skill and with ability and knowledge in all kinds of craftsmanship, to design artistic works in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut gemstones for settings, and to carve wood, that he may be the master of every craft. Moreover, I have selected Oliab, son of Ahismach, of the tribe of Dan, as his assistant. I have also given skill to all the craftsmen, that they may fashion all that I have commanded you: the tent of meeting, the ark of the testimony, and the mercy seat upon it, and all the other furnishings of the tent, the table with its utensils, the pure gold lampstand with all its utensils, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the basin with its stand, as well as the woven garments, both holy garments for Aaron the priest, and garments for his sons to serve as priests, in addition to the anointing oil and the fragrant incense for the holy place." You can see here that all of the ability that was given to the assistant and the craftsman were given directly from the Lord. They didn't have that capability until it was given to them. Exodus 35:34. And the Lord has given both him and Oliab, the son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. He has filled them with skill to do all things, all kinds of works as engravers, designers, embroiderers, in blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, and as weavers, as artistic designers of every kind of craft. So again, we can see another angle of this in Exodus 35:34. The Lord can give man any kind of wisdom. We can see this in other parts of the Bible as well. In Psalms 32:8, it says, I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will give you counsel and watch over you. 1 Kings 3:12. This is Solomon. Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and to discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? Now it pleased the Lord that Solomon had made this request. So God said to him, since you have asked for this instead of requesting long life or wealth for yourself or death for your enemies, but you have asked for discernment to administer justice, behold, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has never been nor will ever be another like you. Solomon was the wisest man in the world, but where did his wisdom come from? He asked the Lord for wisdom, and the Lord gave him wisdom, more than any other man had in the world or ever will. 1 Kings 5:12. And the Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he promised him. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. So again, we can see the Lord can give anyone wisdom. If you humble yourself, if you show humility, he will give you wisdom through his Holy Spirit, the same way he gave the craftsmen the ability to build all these things inside of the temple. Solomon was the wisest man in the world because the Lord gave him that wisdom. Overview of Exodus 31. The Lord told Moses that Bezalel from the tribe of Judah was filled with the Holy Spirit to have the ability to be master of every craft. The Lord told Moses that Oliab from the tribe of Dan was to be the assistant of Bezalel. The Lord told Moses that all the craftsmen were given skill to create the tent of meeting, the Ark of the Covenant, that's the Ark of the Testimony as well, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offerings, the basin, the utensils, and the holy garments that were worn by the priests. The Lord told Moses to tell the Israelites to keep the Sabbath as a sign between the Lord and his people for generations to come, who sanctifies his people. Remember, sanctification, we are separating them, pulling them apart from the world. The Sabbath is holy to us, and anyone who profanes it must be put to death. Whoever does work must be cut off from their people. For 6 days work may be done, but the seventh is a day of rest. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath must be put to death. The Israelites were told they must keep the Sabbath as a permanent covenant, and a covenant's an agreement for generations to come, and that it was a sign between the Lord and the Israelites forever. The earth was created in 6 days, and on the seventh day the Lord rested. When Moses finished speaking to the Lord, he gave him 2 tablets of stone, inscribed by the finger of God. Exodus 32. Details of Exodus 32. We saw the calf, and another big detail I wanted to point out was the Lord wanted to destroy his people. Let's start first with the golden calf. Exodus 32:5. Now when the people saw that Moses was delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this Moses who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him. So remember, when they left on their exodus from Egypt, they had a pillar of fire that guided them by night and a pillar of cloud that guided them by day. Well, now Moses is on the mountain. He's gone. We don't know what happened to him. We're going to need other gods to go before us, just like they were led by this pillar of fire or pillar of cloud. Exodus 34 and 28, we read, "So Moses was there with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. He was fasting. He wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments." I'd just like to point out here that it explicitly says 10 commandments. So the two tablets of stone were explicitly called the 10 commandments. I want to point that out because when I read through carefully the verses talking about the 10 commandments, to me it looked like there might be more than 10. But the Bible officially called it in Exodus 34:28 the 10 commandments. And you'll notice here the 40 days and 40 nights, that also coincides with what we saw with Christ. When Christ fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he had seen the devil, Satan. He approached him and tried to tempt him. Well, here we can see Moses also fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, but here Moses is speaking to the Lord. So in one case, we see someone trying to undo the law. In this case, we can see Moses is receiving the law. But this is why the people thought he wasn't coming back. He was gone for 40 days and 40 nights, so they assumed he's dead. Exodus 32, 2-5. So Aaron told them, "Take off the gold earrings that are on your wives and sons and daughters and bring them to me." So this was Aaron that said this. Then all the people took off their gold earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from their hands, and with an engraving tool, he fashioned it into a molten calf. Molten is metal. And then they said, "These, O Israel, are your gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before the calf and proclaimed, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." So who do you think the Lord is here? They're talking about this golden calf, this molten metal calf, which was made out of their jewelry. And remember, the jewelry that they had was given to them after they had left from Egypt. When the firstborn were killed, the people were just more than willing to give up their jewelry as the Exodus began, and the Jews, or the Israelites, left out of Egypt. This was the same jewelry they were using to make this molten calf. Exodus 32, 21-24. "What did this people do to you?" Moses asked Aaron, "that you have led them into such a great sin? Do not be enraged, my Lord." Now notice it's in lowercase. Lowercase Lord, that's a title, that's referring to man. But when it's in uppercase, we know it's the Lord of Israel. In other words, it's Christ. "Do not be enraged, my Lord," Aaron replied as he spoke to Moses. "You yourself know that the people are intent on evil. They told me, 'Make us gods who will go before us.' As for this Moses who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him." So I said to them, "Whoever has gold, let him take it off." And they gave it to me. And when I threw it into the fire, out came this calf. Aaron lied to Moses. Compare Exodus 32-24 to Exodus 32, 3-4. So I said to them, "Whoever has gold, let him take it off." And they gave it to me. This part's accurate. Here's the lie. "And when I threw it into the fire, out came this calf." That's the lie. Look a little bit before in Exodus 32, 3-4. Then all the people took off their gold earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from their hands, and with an engraving tool, he fashioned it into a molten calf. So he didn't throw it in the fire. He engraved this by hand. He made this idol. If you take a look, the engraving tool is exactly what it says. And they said, "These, O Israel, are your gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Exodus 32 and 19. As Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he burned with anger, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, shattering them at the base of the mountain. So the first set of the 10 commandments that were given to Moses, when he came down and saw the golden calf, he smashed the 10 commandments on the ground. In other words, the law of God was destroyed when he saw this calf. Why a golden calf? What exactly is going on? Why did they have this image of a golden calf of all things? Why not something else? Book of Acts will tell you. Acts 7, 39-43. But our fathers refused to obey him. Who are we talking about here? We'll see. Instead, they rejected him, and in their hearts turned back to Egypt. And they said to Aaron, "Make us gods who will go before us." So when it says, "But our fathers refused to obey him," they're talking about Moses. They said to Aaron, "Make us gods who will go before us. As for this Moses, who led us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. At that time, they made a calf and offered a sacrifice to the idol. So here we're looking at the New Testament talking about the Old Testament, rejoicing in the works of their hands. But God turned away from them and gave them over to the worship of the host of heaven. I'll repeat that. So when they made this idol, it says, but God turned away from them and gave them over to the worship of the host of heaven. They are worshiping the stars. This golden calf had something to do with the worship of the stars. As is written in the book of the prophets, did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You have taken along the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Raphan, and the idols you made to worship. Therefore I will exile you, or therefore I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. So yes, in fact, it is the worship of the host of heaven, because it specifically says in Acts 7:43, the star of your god Raphan. We just don't know who Raphan is yet, but we can tell it has something to do with the golden calf. We can also see it says the tabernacle of Moloch. And we know that the tabernacle was basically a moving tent. So now, instead of being a tent to God, we see a tent to something called Moloch. And then we also see the star of your god Raphan. And in 42, it says, God gave them over to the worship of the host of heaven. So then Egypt must have been involved with the worship of the heavens. Who is Moloch? Moloch 34:34. This is in Greek because, of course, we're looking at the New Testament. It says Moloch was the god of the Ammonites. And then if you take a look, you'll see word origin, Hebrew, Molech, M-O-L-E-K. I'll point out that the Ammonites, you had two children. You had Moab, and then you had Ben-Ami, which was the Ammonites. Who are those two children? Well, those were the descendants of Lot. You see, Sodom and Gomorrah was supposed to be destroyed. But then the angels, because Abraham had requested, took out Lot. And Lot, his wife, looked back. She was turned into a pillar of salt. So then the daughters decided, well, we have to give our father lineage. So what we'll do is we'll get him drunk and sleep with him. And the two children were Ben-Ami and Moab. And here we see the Ammonites. So this god Moloch is attached to the Ammonites. This wouldn't have happened, or maybe it wouldn't have happened, if Lot didn't have children. So here we can see this has something to do with Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know that there is a vine of Sodom. And the vine of Sodom must be similar to the vine we call Christ. But their vine is not like our vine. Their rock is not like our rock. Let's look at the Hebrew origin of the word Moloch. A heathen god to whom the Israelites sacrificed their children. Yes, that's right. They killed their children in honor and worship of this god, this star god. And if you take a look, you can see it has a word origin of Melech. Melech is the Hebrew word for king. So there's an association to the word Moloch and Melech, as in some kind of a king. And it's interesting because when you look at these translations, it does mention the word king. Leviticus 18:21. You must not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch. So here you can tell there was child sacrifice. You must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. A lot of people have tried to deny that the Canaanites, the Greeks, the Romans had anything to do with the sacrifice of children. Another name for the Canaanites would be the people of Carthage, the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, in more modern years, we have discovered that yes, in fact, they did sacrifice their children. They have found plots of land where there were bones of children by altars. Here's Moloch. You can see in this image here, he looks like a bull. And in his hands, what do you see? A child. So he was an idol. He was like an oven. They would basically put fire into the oven by basically starting a fire at the bottom part of Moloch. They would then take the child and place the child in the hands of this idol. Since the idol was made out of metal, as the idol would heat up, it would cook the child in the hands of the idol. It was barbaric. If you can see in the other picture, they're blowing on trumpets. What they would do is they would go into these sacred places, these groves, and they would bang on drums, and they would try to drown out the sound of the children screaming, and they would sacrifice these children in the hand of the idol. Amos 5:25-27. Did you bring me And you can see me is an uppercase, so it's talking about the Lord. Did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You have taken along Succoth, your king, and Kaiwan, your star god, the idols you made for yourselves. You notice something similar here? This looks a lot like the book of Acts. Amos is the Old Testament. Book of Acts is the New Testament. We're talking about the same event, which is taking place in Exodus when they're in the wilderness. That's when they're there for 40 years. Did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You have taken along Succoth, your king, and Kaiwan, your star god, the idols you made for yourselves. These are the same event. Look at Acts 7:43. You have taken along the tabernacle of Moloch. So here we can see instead of Succoth, your king, we see tabernacle of Moloch. Moloch comes from Melech, and Melech means king. So we can see, comparing Amos to Acts, we can see the kingship. And the star of your god, Raphan. So in Amos, we see the word Kaiwan, but in Acts, we see Raphan. The idols you made to worship. Therefore, I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. Let's compare the BSB, the Berean Study Bible, to the KJV. You have taken along Succoth, your king, and Kaiwan, your star god, the idols you made for yourself. So this is clearly the golden calf. Who is Kaiwan or Chayun? Because if we look at Amos 5:26 in the KJV, we don't see the word Kaiwan, we see Chayun. But ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and Chayun your images, the star of your God, which ye made to yourselves. So who is this Kaiwan? Who is Chayun? Who is the golden calf? What is the star god that they're worshiping? Can we put our finger on it? This is the Jewish Encyclopedia. We're looking up the word Chayun. A word occurring in connection with Succoth in Amos 5:26. Scholars have long been puzzled to know whether in this passage they are common nouns or proper names. Succoth is probably the Assyrian Sukkot, an epithet of Ninib. So epithet is a title. And Anu. Ninib was identified with Saturn. There we go. So who's Chayun? Chayun is Saturn. The Assyrian name of which was Kaiwan. So Saturn was known as Kaiwan, or also known as Ninib, or also known as Chayun. So Saturn is a planet. And we know that planet in Greek is planetas, and planetas means wandering stars. The people were worshiping the wandering star Saturn, and they were sacrificing their children to Saturn. And they were doing so under the emblem of this calf or a bull. Their idol was to Saturn, the Roman god Saturn. So did the Romans sacrifice their children? Quite likely at some times in history, we found some evidence of it. Azazel was the goat god, and Azazel is Saturn. He's the evil one. When you say the Lord's Prayer, you finish it with, protect me from evil, or some of you will know it's protect me from the evil ones. Azazel is the evil one. This was not the only time that Israel did this. This was not the only time in Israel's history that they had went back and forth between the worship of this god Moloch, which we know is Chayun, which is Remphan, which the Romans would call Saturn. 1 Kings 12:28. After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves and said to the people, going up to Jerusalem is too much for you. Here, O Israel, are your gods, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So we can see the exact same thing going on in the book of 1 Kings, which is much later in the timeline. This is after the time they were in the wilderness. This is when the northern kingdom of Israel split from the southern province of Judea. So you had a north kingdom and a southern kingdom. The north kingdom was ran by Jeroboam, and he was an Ephraimite. And the southern kingdom was ran by Rehoboam, which was the son of Solomon. The southern kingdom was only the legitimate kingdom. And since the people didn't want to be inconvenienced by having to go all the way down to the south to Judea, they decided they're going to make their own idols. And this would be their new way of performing their sacrifice and worship. So again, they had degenerated back to what they were doing as they left Egypt. In the wilderness, they had set up their golden calf. And here we see the northern kingdom had set up 2 golden calves. So that way, going to Jerusalem, where the actual temple was, it wouldn't be too much work for them because now they have these 2 new calf idols. But now we know this is Moloch. It's Saturn. It's star worship. Nehemiah 9 and 18. Even when they cast for themselves an image of the calf and said, "This is your God, who brought you up out of Egypt." And when they committed terrible blasphemies. So here again, we can see in Nehemiah, it's talking about this image of a calf. And you can see this constant connection to Egypt. Do not worship the gods that came from Egypt. It comes up in the Bible a lot. If you have anything to do in any of your celebrations, traditions, and you can see those celebrations or traditions or holidays are pointing you back to Egypt, stop. What were these terrible blasphemies? 1 Corinthians 10 and 5. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, for they were struck down in the wilderness. These things took place as examples to keep us from craving evil things as they did. So you can see that something having to do with their degenerated worship of this golden calf, it made them crave to do evil over time. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and to drink and got up to indulge in revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 of them died. So we can see there's a connection to this symbolism of not just death, but also sex. We can see that Moloch was a god that they would sacrifice their children to. Saturn, Raphan, Chayun, this star, they would sacrifice their children to this god. They started to crave evil. And we can also see sexual immorality. So what we're seeing here is a sex and a death cult. The Lord was so angry, he wanted to destroy his people. He knew what they were doing down below. Why was he so angry? Because he knew what the future would be. He knew that what started off as just a simple golden calf would evolve into something much more horrific, the killing of their children and immoral sex. But Moses pleaded that he would relent of his anger. Please don't destroy your people. Because, of course, what would the Egyptians say if they had taken the people out of Egypt? So Moses was led by the God of Israel to take people out of Egypt, the Israelites. What would the Egyptians and the rest of the world say if they just took them out of Egypt just to slaughter them all in the mountains? So Moses pleaded. Hebrews 6 and 13. When God made his promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater to swear by, he swore by himself. So when the promise was made, this is exactly what Moses was talking about. Moses had spoke to the Lord and said, Lord, relent, please. Don't be so angry that you destroy your people. You swore by your own name that you would keep these people. And then here we can see in Hebrews, it's brought up again. The Lord did, in fact, swear by his own name. Where did we see this exactly? In Genesis. Genesis 22 and 16. Saying, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your only son. We'll stop right there. We can see that, in fact, yes, the Lord swore by his own name. Since we have a God that is a God of truth, does our Lord ever say something and then contradict himself? Never. So then if the Lord swears by his own name, could he have destroyed his people? No. And Moses reminded him of that. Exodus 32. When Moses was delayed from coming down Mount Sinai, the Israelites said to Aaron, let us make gods to go before us, as they believed Moses was dead. Remember, he hadn't eaten for 40 days and 40 nights. Aaron told them to bring their gold rings from their wives, sons, and daughters to him, which he made into a metal calf or a molten calf with an engraving tool. Now, if it was made with an engraving tool, Aaron can't say that it just popped in the fire and popped out. No, this was made with an engraving tool. You put some effort into this. The people responded by claiming that these are the gods that brought them out of Egypt. And Aaron built an altar before the calf and proclaimed, tomorrow will be a feast to the Lord. So even Aaron was looking at this calf as if it was the Lord of Israel. He was denoting that this was the Lord of Israel. It's funny because we see in the Israelite history, they get confused between Baal and the Lord. And remember, what does Baal mean? Baal is a title, which means Lord. So we have the golden calf, which we know now as Saturn, and then we have the Lord of Israel. We've got the two lords. This is exactly why you have this idea of don't call me Bali, call me Ishi. In other words, don't call me master, don't call me Lord, because the pagans, their God, they called him Baal, they called him Lord. The following day, the people ate, they drank, and gave burnt offerings and peace offerings to the metal image as they indulged in revelry. While Moses was speaking with the Lord on the mountain, the Lord told Moses the people created an idol of a metal calf, which they bowed down to as their God. The Lord told Moses his anger would burn against them and that Moses would be made into a great nation. So here the Lord's like, you know what? Scrap this. I'm going to get rid of all the Israelites. Moses, you'll be a great nation. The rest of them, I'm going to let out my wrath. Moses appealed to God and said the Egyptians would see this as an evil intent, as the people were just brought out of the mountains to be killed. And he asked the Lord to relent of his anger. So what would it look like to the surrounding nations if first this mighty God of Israel brings the people out of Egypt, shows these immense miracles, shows these plagues that the Egyptian magicians weren't able to replicate, and then he takes them out into the mountains just to kill them. But of course, remember, the Lord swore by his own name he wouldn't. He would keep these people, even though they're stubborn. Moses reminded the Lord that he swore by his own name, Hebrews 6:13, Genesis 22:16, that Israel would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and he would give them the land he promised as an inheritance forever. The Lord relented, and Moses went back down the mountain with the 2 tablets of stone which were inscribed on both sides, front and back, which held the writing of God written with his finger. Joshua heard the sound of the people shouting, and there was war, and said there was war in the camp. But Moses said it was the sound of singing. Moses took the 2 tablets and smashed them when he saw the people dancing and singing around the calf. He took the calf, burned it in the fire, and ground it into powder, then scattered the powder onto the face of the water, and then forced them to drink. Moses questioned Aaron as to what the people did to make this happen. And Aaron responded that the people said they didn't know what happened to Moses and asked Aaron to create gods to go before them. Aaron said to Moses that he said whoever had gold to take it off and placed it in the fire, and out came the calf. We know that isn't true. Moses said at the entrance of the camp that whoever is for the Lord to come to him, and all the Levites gathered around him. Moses told them to grab their swords and to go through the camp and slay their brothers, friends, and neighbors who were not for the Lord. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and about 3,000 fell dead. Moses told the Levites that they had been ordained for their service to the Lord, and that he bestowed upon them a blessing. So on this day when they worshiped the golden calf, the Levites were ordained. The Levites picked up their swords, slayed their brothers, slayed their friends, slayed their neighbors, because they chose this calf, or they chose Baal over the Lord. Moses told the people the next day that they had committed a great sin, and that he was going to go back to see the Lord and make an atonement. Moses requested the Lord forget their sin. We see in the New Testament this happens. When you repent, when you stop sinning and you repent to the Lord, he will forget your old sins. But if you do not, he will remember every single sin you did, and you will see on judgment. Moses requested the Lord forget their sin, or to also blot him out of the book of life. But the Lord said whoever sinned against him, he would blot out of the book of life. Remember, we have this new covenant now. The people weren't able to keep the law. The new covenant, which we see in the New Testament, is through Christ, through our faith in Christ and testifying that Christ is the Lord. But we must stop sinning. If we love Christ, we must stop sinning. The Lord told Moses to lead the people to the place he had described, and his angel would go before them. And on the day he settled accounts, he would punish them for their sin. The Lord sent a plague on the people for what they had done and the calf Aaron had made. This is very interesting because we see that there's a plague in the end of the book. In the book of Revelation, we see there's a plague that comes on the people, and it has to do with Babylon. It says, come out of her, my people. In other words, Babylon was some kind of a false religious system. And here we can see people are involved in a false religious system. They had an idol of a calf, and they are worshiping it. And here we can see in the end of Exodus 32, there was a plague that came upon these people. In the book of Revelation, we can see the ones who didn't come out of Babylon, they were going to suffer from the future plagues. We know that Babylon is a false religious system, and we also know that Babylon is associated to some kind of a goddess. But of course, what do we notice here? We notice that there is a sex and a death cult. There is a god and a goddess that was worshipped in the old world. Exodus 33. The Lord told Abraham to leave the Israelites and to go to the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when he said he would give it to their descendants. The Lord said he would send an angel before them, and he would drive out the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The Lord told them to go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, and that he would not go with them because the people were stiff-necked, they were stubborn, and he might destroy them on the way. The Lord said, I'm not going to come with you. These people are so stubborn, I'll just end up killing them. When the people heard this message, they mourned, and they took off their jewelry, because the Lord told Moses to tell them they were stubborn, and if he accompanied them for a single moment, he would destroy them. They were told to take off their jewelry while the Lord decided what to do with them. The Israelites stripped off their jewelry from Mount Horeb and onward. So after this point, they weren't very prideful anymore. They took off all the jewelry that they had accumulated when they were in Egypt because they felt unworthy. Moses would pitch the tent of meeting outside of the camp, and anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent outside the camp. When Moses entered the tent, the people would watch, and as Moses entered, the pillar of cloud would come down and remain at the entrance while the Lord spoke to Moses. When the people saw the pillar of cloud at the entrance of the tent, they would stand up and worship in front of their tents. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And when Moses returned to the camp, Joshua would remain at the tent of meeting. Moses said to the Lord that he told him to lead his people, but he hadn't let Moses know who he would send with him. So remember, the Lord said, I'm not going with you. I'll send this angel. I'll send someone else instead. And so Moses is asking, well, if I'm going to lead these people, let me know. What's your plan? Who are you going to send? The Lord told Moses his presence would go with them and give them rest. Moses replied that if the Lord's presence did not go with them, how would Israel be known as his people or be distinguished from the other people of the earth? The Lord told Moses that he had found favor in his sight, and he would do this thing as well as he knew Moses by name. So since Moses and the Lord were friends, when Moses had put a request forward, first he asked, please relent, do not be angry. We saw this in the previous chapter. And the Lord remembered his promise. He swore by his own name. And here Moses said, well, if we go and the people see that you're not with us, how will they know that we are your people? And so because of this relationship that Moses had with the Lord, and he knew him by name, he had done this favor for him. Moses asked the Lord to see his glory. So Moses wanted to see God. He wanted to actually see him. And you're like, well, didn't he see him on the mountain? No, there was a fire on the mountain. And the fire on the mountain, Moses was being spoke to from that fire that the people saw on top of the mountain. Fire and cloud. Moses asked to see his glory. And the Lord said he would pass before Moses and proclaim his name in his presence. So here we're seeing this is when the Lord actually proclaimed his name. Remember, Moses' mother Jochebed already had this name. And the only explanation we have for this is Genesis 4:26, not in the Masoretic text, but if we take a look in the King James Version, we see that in the side notes, the word proclaim was looked at as profane. The reason why is because the people were making themselves into idols by the name of the Lord. And we can see this in some Jewish texts, and we can see this in the 1611 King James Bible. But here we see in Exodus 33, Moses is asking to see the glory of the Lord, and when he passes by, this is when he proclaims his name. This isn't the name Ea Asher Ea. That was from Exodus 3:14. Stating he would have mercy on those he would have mercy, and compassion on he would have compassion, but that Moses could not see his face, as no one could see the face of the Lord and live. So here we see that the Lord tells Moses, I'm going to proclaim my name to you. I will pass before you. You cannot see my face or you will die. And I choose to have mercy on who I have mercy and compassion on who I have compassion. The Lord told Moses there was a place near him where he could stand upon a rock. And when his glory passed by, he would put a cleft in the rock and cover Moses with his hand until he passed by, and that Moses could see his back when his hand was taken away, but not his face. Remember, if Moses was to see the face of God, he would die. So he was allowed to see his back. So here's some bonus content, and this is on Moloch, since we were talking about Moloch, and we know now that it's connected to the golden calf. And the golden calf, we can tell from the book of Acts and the book of Amos, this is pointing us towards Saturn. The Romans worshipped Saturn. The Greeks worshipped Saturn as Kronos. Many nations worship Saturn. And we know that both the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, and the Greeks, in more modern years, we can prove that they did, in fact, sacrifice their children. Scholars deny that this was ever a thing. But in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of research that's come out to show that the Phoenicians, the Romans, and Greeks all sacrificed their children. And so if we see that this god, the golden calf, Moloch, if Moloch is in fact Saturn, and the Greeks we know worship Saturn as Cronus, and the Phoenicians worship Saturn as El, we can start to see why there was child sacrifice in all of these places. But did you know that from September the 27th, 2019 to March the 29th, 2020, they put this god Moloch in Rome. They had this statue, they had this idol that was supposed to be on display. It was a Carthago exhibit. So Carthage was the name of the headquarters of Phoenicia. That's northern Africa. The Phoenicians were the Canaanites of the Bible. Well, in Rome, in the Colosseum of all places, and I'll explain why that's important. In the Colosseum of all places, they put Moloch on display just between September 27th and March the 29th, which is kind of when we saw these lockdowns start for the coronavirus. I think that's really interesting because Moloch is clearly some kind of a sun god. You can see the sun on his chest. Also notice on the chest of Moloch, what do we see? A 6-pointed star. And didn't it mention the fact that they had a star of Chayun, the star of Remphan? Is this the star? Statue of Moloch, pagan deity of child sacrifice displayed at the Colosseum, Christian Broadcast Network. It says, call it an odd juxtaposition or a paean to the bloody pagan practices of two warring cities, ancient Rome and its ancient Mediterranean rival, Carthage. I don't know if you know this, but when there was a war between Rome and Carthage, it was called the Three Punic Wars. The Greeks called the Phoenicians the Punic people. When the Romans were unable to defeat the Punics, the Phoenicians, the Canaanites, what did they do? They brought the gods of the Canaanites to Rome. And then when the Third Punic War happened, the Romans wiped out Carthage. They took out the Phoenicians. That was the end of the Phoenician Empire. So Carthage, the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, there is a connection here to the gods that they worshipped and obviously the gods that the Romans worshipped, because the Romans had brought their gods into Rome and then defeated the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians. Goes on and says, from now through March 2020, as part of an exhibit celebrating the city of Carthage, a giant statue of Moloch, the god of the ancient Canaanites and Carthaginians, will greet visitors at the entrance to the Roman Colosseum. Moloch is a pagan god who required his devotees to toss their children into his fiery belly as an act of worship. The location of the display is particularly worth noting since the Roman Colosseum is where many early Christians were slaughtered at the hands of lunatic dictators, fearful of a faith they could not stop. Here it is. Here's the key sentence. Previously, the Catholic Church had made the Colosseum a sacred site to honor these first Christians martyred for their faith, even placing stations of the cross there for the faithful to contemplate their sacrifice. So you're telling me the same place where the Christian martyrs were honored for their faith, they placed a statue from 2019 to 2020, the start of the coronavirus. They placed that there with Moloch. Now it's guarded by the pagan god Moloch, whose demand for child sacrifice has been compared to the modern epidemic of abortion. And the faithful are greeted with a statue honoring a pagan deity whose murderous spirit still seeks to kill children. My question, Edom, why are your robes crimson? Remember, when we studied Exodus, we found that the high priest, he wore primarily blue. While there was some scarlet thread, primarily what he wore was blue because the apron that was on the high priest, and specifically the high priest, it was blue. Isaiah 63:1. Who is this coming from Edom, from Bozrah, with crimson-stained garments? Who is this robed in splendor, marching in the greatness of his strength? It is I, proclaiming vindication, mighty to save. Edom was saying that he was some kind of a savior. Why are your clothes red and your garments like the one who treads the winepress? The Lord in Revelation is the one who treads the winepress, and he does it during the wrath of God. So here we can see that Edom, what was the brother of Jacob, that was Esau and Jacob, the Edomites, they were in Jordan. And Bozrah, that's in Jordan. And so here we can see that their garments were crimson stained. Crimson stained garments. Edom. Edom in Hebrew means red. The Roman Empire, the Empire of the Edomite, 1853. Edom, why are your garments stained red? These are the rock hotels or rock buildings that you can see in Jordan. These are the structures that you see in Rome. I'll repeat the question. Edom, why are your clothes stained red? The name Edom is used by Talmudists for the Roman Empire, Jewish Encyclopedia, and they applied to Rome every passage of the Bible referring to Edom or Esau. Edom, why are your robes stained red? Could this be symbolic to the blood of the innocent? Remember, those who worship Moloch, they were involved in the sacrifice of children. They were also involved in some kind of a sex cult. Edom, why are your robes stained red?
For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Brothers and sisters, the sword is coming. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. That at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow.